Hey folks, let's take a minute to step back from the hype and think about what actually matters when you're hunting for a new gaming laptop. You've probably seen a dozen titles flash across your feed, each promising the ultimate experience or the best price-to performance ratio. The real question is whether the machine you end up buying will actually fit into the way you play, work, and travel. If you've ever bought a laptop that could run the latest titles but cranked up the fan noise to a level that makes a coffee shop feel like a server room, you know the kind of disappointment I'm talking about. That's why I'm going to walk through the ASUS TUF Gaming A15 2023 in a way that helps you decide if it's a sensible fit or just another glossy spec sheet. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the core piece that most people care about, the processor and GPU combo. The A15 ships with an AMD Ryzen 9 7940HS and an NVIDIA RTX 4070. On paper, that's a powerhouse capable of handling AAA titles at high settings, plus the extra horsepower for video editing or 3D rendering if you also use the laptop for creative work. In everyday use, this means you can launch a game like Cyberpunk 2077, set graphics to ultra, and still see stable frame rates above 60 frames per second on the 144Hz screen. The RTX 4070's ray tracing cores also let you enable DLSS or ray tracing without a massive dip in performance. For creators, the CPU's 8 cores and 16 threads keep Adobe Premiere or Blender responsive, even when you're rendering a 1080p video while a game runs in the background. Now, the display. The 15.6-inch FHD panel runs at 144Hz, which is a sweet spot for competitive gamers who need smooth motion without the battery drain of a 4K screen. In my own testing, the panel delivered consistent brightness around 300 nits, enough for indoor play, and the color accuracy was decent out of the box, though it isn't a factory-calibrated sRGB panel, so if you need color-critical work you'll want to crank a calibration tool later. The real win here is the combination of a relatively high refresh rate with a reasonably low power draw from the display, letting you game for a solid 3 to 4 hours before you start hunting for a charger. Speaking of power, the A15's 1TB PCIe SSD is fast enough that loading times in open-world games feel almost instantaneous. You'll notice a difference when you jump from the desktop to a game that streams world data. The SSD will zip that transition in a couple of seconds, rather than the 8 to 10 seconds you might see on a typical SATA drive. The 16GB of DDR5 4800 memory also means multitasking feels fluid. I tried running Chrome with a full tab load, Spotify, and a game simultaneously, and the system didn't stutter. The DDR5 speed does give a modest uplift over older DDR4 models, but the real benefit appears when you're doing memory-intensive tasks like video encoding. One feature that often gets lost in the spec sheet is the MUX switch. ASUS calls it Advanced Optimus, and it essentially lets you bypass the integrated graphics and force the RTX 4070 to drive the display directly. In practice, this reduces input lag and can bump frame rates a few percent higher, which matters in fast-paced shooters. The switch is a hardware toggle in the BIOS, so you won't accidentally flip it while gaming. If you're the type who cares about every millisecond, you'll appreciate the option, though casual gamers might never notice the difference. Now, let's talk about the trade-offs that aren't obvious at first glance. The A15 is marketed as a TUF model, which suggests ruggedness, and the chassis does feel solid. There are reinforced corners and a magnesium alloy shell. However, the design leans more toward a utilitarian gray rather than the sleek aluminum finish you see on some competing laptops. This isn't a flaw, it's a conscious choice by ASUS to keep weight down, but the laptop still tips the scale at about 5.2 pounds. That makes it portable enough for a coffee shop, but if you're looking for a truly light ultrabook that you can toss into a backpack, you'll notice the heft. The cooling system uses 2 large fans and several heat pipes, which keep the CPU from throttling under load, yet they also produce a noticeable whine at higher wattages. In a quiet room, the fan noise can climb to 55 dB, which is comparable to background chatter. If you stream your gameplay, that noise will be captured unless you use a separate mic or a noise gate filter. Battery life is another practical consideration. With the RTX 4070 engaged, the 76Wh battery will give you roughly 45 hours of mixed usage, say a couple of games, web browsing, and a bit of office work. If you unplug to attend a lecture or sit in a co-working space, you'll need to keep a charger handy. By contrast, if you power down the GPU with the MUX switch and stay on,